Okay, so let's start the workshop right now. So, hi, my name is Rafael. I am a senior in Riverside Secondary School, and I'm going to be hosting the Intro to Python workshop today. So let's get, I don't think again, let's get right at it. So we can finish a bit early. So a bit of, I guess, note before we start is that I'm not going to go in depth with each of the concepts in Python, just the basics ones, because once you know the concept and you want to get a bit further on it, a bit advanced on it, you can just search it up on Google and like in a snap, you could just, and that's it. You could just like learn it really quick. Okay, so first things first, let's talk about an IDE before we get started because IDE is sort of really important. An IDE just stands for Integrated Development Environment. It is just a fancy word for a place where you're gonna be coding. There's a lot of IDEs out there. You got Visual Studio Code, you got PyScripter, you got a bunch of those. I mean, you could use those for sure. But I'm gonna be using Replit, and I would say kind of recommend you use it. But if you want to follow along and you want it fast, I would say go for Replit. Replit is just an online IDE, and essentially, it's just there when you go for Replit online in your browser. When you click on it, it's just there. Everything's set up. You just write code and that's it. So to go to Replit, you just type Replit, then Python 3. Once you do that, then that's it. You should be in, click the first link, and that's it. You are in Replit. You can type code, whatever you want to code in. That's it. You can just type it. You can also use different programming languages if you're interested in C++, C, Java, Ruby, Rust, Kotlin. You could just do it. So, so to get started, let's create our first program ever. Let's get a bit excited, right? So, when to create our first program, we just type the keyword print, then open and just round brackets after that. Then after that, we type a quotation code. Inside of that, let's just print our message. Let's say my first program. Actually, you know what? Even better, let's just type hello world because it's like a classic thing. So when we do that, what print would do is it would just output anything inside the round brackets. So when we run this, we we get hello world, which is congrats, clap, give yourself a pat in the back because you just created your first program. So if you all don't understand what this thing is or what print is, it's fine. We're going to talk about that. But the key thing you should keep in mind is that this print statement here would just print or output anything inside this uh, open round brackets. So first things first, let's talk about variables. Variables are pretty important because we're going to be using that throughout the program, and not just in Python, but all, like probably majority of the languages you're going to learn. So a variable is just a container for some value. It's just like a box that you could put things in, right? So let's create a variable. To create a variable, we just call a unique name. It has to be unique. It means that if you have a program that is the same name, you have to change your variable. So to create it, let's just call the variable name. Then after that, you type the equal sign. That tells Python, okay, whatever the value we have on this side, I want you to assign that to here. So let's create a string, assign it to a string, let's say called wrap, right? So what this does is that it tells Python that, okay, I want this value, wrap, assigned to name, right? So let's say I want to let's think about it for a second. Like, what would happen if I call out name? What would happen if I print name out? What would happen? So when we do that, when we output name, it would output ref. Why? Because ref is now equal to name, right? When you have algebra, when you have math, right, you will see variables and how variables work in algebra or in math. It works exactly like that. I mean, not exactly, but it works pretty close like that in Python or in programming, right? So that's how we create variables. You could store more, not just strings in variables. You could store graph. That's in capacity. Let's do this. Then let's just output whatever the variable is in here, right? So we could store multiple things, multiple sort of data types in a variable, not just strings. We could put numbers in there. Let's say we have age. Let's say we are 20. We could like output that. We could put not just strings. We could put integers on it and stuff. See, we got 20. If you don't know what a data type is, that's where we're gonna segue right now. A data type is it's just the type of data you're going to be encountering throughout your program, right? It's important to know what type of data type the data you're handling, because different data types serve different purpose and we handle them differently, right? We handle different data types differently and it works differently as well. So the first data type we're going to be talking about is strings. We've used strings before to put our first program, right? So strings is just a series of characters inside a quotation. So anything inside this quotation is considered a string plus the quotation, right? So if I type some random words out here, that is considered a string. If I type numbers in here, that is considered as a string. So let's say we have a variable. We could store whatever data type it is into a variable. We could just a variable is just a container, right? Let's say we have rando here as a variable name, and we want to create a string. Rando, you can even just like smash the keyboard, and that would still be considered as a string. If we were to print rando, it would just give you this, right? So that is a string. So let's talk about the other data type, integers. Integers are just literally just numbers. 9, 8, 999 000 99999, that is considered an integer. But the thing about integers is that you might be confused about strings and integers together. When you have 9, that's an integer, but when you have string 9, this is now a string because it is enclosed with quotation codes. Whatever it is enclosed on the quotation codes, that is automatically considered as a string. But when you but if it's just a number, like this without quotation codes, that would now be considered as an integer. So the second data type we have is now called a float. A float is sort of the same thing as integers. So let's say like this, but with a decimal point. Whenever you see a decimal point on a number, that is automatically considered as a float. Even just, let's say 99.0, you might think, okay, that's an integer, right? It's a clean number, right? No, it is still considered as a float because we have a decimal point here, right? The other data type we can look at is Boolean. A Boolean is simple. Boolean is just true or false, either this or either this. You might think that is kind of pointless and useless, but in the future, we're going to be learning about if statements, while loop, for loops like that. It's going to be really important, right? So a bit of a recap. Strings is anything inside a quotation. Integers are just numbers without a quotation. A float is just any integer with a decimal point. Boolean is just true or false. That's it. Let's talk about a bit more about data types. We could add things together in Python. We could do math in Python, right? So let's say we have equation as the variable name. We're assigning that to whatever value we have here. Let's say I want to do 9 times 9 times 9. The multiplication symbol in, I guess, in Python or any probably like majority programming language out there is asterisk, I think. Then 9 times 9 is how we write 9 times 9. When we print what 9 times 9 would be, I think I hope I spelled that correctly. A should give us 81. You could even do bed math in Python, right? Let's say we have 9 times, say we have 9 times 9, then to the power of 2. To write to the power of 2, we just write double asterisk, then whatever value we want it to raise. So let's say we want it to the power of 2. So we just write this, right? It works like this. It works, right? And let's say we have we want to add 5 to it. Let's make it more bed massy or something like that. We could do that. Simple. But the important thing we have to understand and realize is that we cannot add 2 different data types together. Or we cannot add, subtract 2 data types together besides integers and floats. So let's say we have a string, right? Let's say we have, let's say we do the equation again as a variable name. Let's say we have 9 plus 9. You might think, okay, that should work, right? That should be like 18. Looks fine to me. Well, you'll be wrong because you cannot add 2 different data types together. There are workarounds. There's gonna be like a work around it later on, but the important thing is that you cannot add 2 data types together. But you could add, with the exception of float and integers, because you could do 9.5 plus 9, that's going to give you 18.5, right? You could do that, but you cannot add a string and an integer together. I think that's pretty much the same as like having true as a boolean value plus like 5 or something like that. You can't do that. Oh, whoa. Okay, but don't do that. It works sort of, but do not do that, because that's not gonna give you a proper value in the long run. So yeah, don't add 2 data types together, because it's not gonna work. Besides float and integers, you could. Let's talk about the workaround that I've mentioned earlier, right? Let's say let's say we want to add a string and an integer together, right? Like, how do I do it, right? How do I do it? So let's type equation. Let's do the same example as earlier. 9 plus 9 here, right? And it's not gonna work because we cannot add strings and integers together. But what's the workaround here? This is where typecasting comes in, right? So let's just also, I guess it's good to go over this real quick. But to comment something in Python is just type hashtag, and anything after the hashtag will not be rendered, or Python will just ignore it essentially. If you have a hashtag, anything after that will be ignored by Python. So this is, if you want to work around adding different data types together, this is where typecasting comes in. Typecasting is pretty simple because typecasting is just converting one data type to another. Let's say I want to convert a string into integers, or integers to string, right? Let's say we have the integer. Let's say we have num as a variable, and inside the num we have the 9, right? Let's say I want to convert the 9 into strings, right? Let's say I want to do that. We just we just use the function str, then round brackets. Anything inside that round brackets will now be converted into strings. So when we put num here, that's going to convert num into strings. But the important thing to know is that when you do this, it's not permanent. You're not like, when you do this, it's not permanent. So when you do num plus probably like 9 here, it would still give an error probably, because num is still an integer, because when you do this, it's not permanent. It's just temporary, right? You're just converting it there. You're not really doing anything with it, right? To make it permanent, you could just do num equals str num. Whenever you change the value of a variable in Python, Python will always keep track of it. So here, you see num is equal to 9, which is an integer, and you change that to num, which is this, and a string. now Python will keep track of it. Python keeps track that num is now equal to a string of 9. So when you do num plus 9 here, it will now work because they're both string now. And this is like a good example of concatenation or adding strings together, but we're gonna get more to that later on. But an important thing to know is that we can convert data type from one data type to another. We converted an integer into strings. So let's try to convert a string into integers, right? Let's say you have an example of, let's say, I don't know, SDRE, as a variable name. Let's say we have we have that equal to the string of 9. Let's say I want to convert that to integer, right? Well, we could by doing SRE. Let's just make it permanent so it's easier. So SR, let's put int. To convert anything to integers, we just type the keyword int, then round brackets. Inside that int, round brackets, let's say the round brackets of an int, anything inside of that will be converted now to integers. So when we do SDRE, it's going to be like 9 plus 5. That's going to give it, oh, no, sorry. That's going to give SDRE, which is equal to 9 as an integer. We add that to 5. That's going to give us 14, right? There's also a way to figure out what data type it is. I mean, we should know what data type it is just by looking at it. But if you can't do that, I mean, there's different reasons why you can do it, maybe in the future. But if you want to like check it and everything, we have a function called type. So anything inside this round brackets, it will tell you, Python will tell you what type of data type it is, right? So when you do, let's say, a string of graph, let's say here, when we run this, it should give us nothing. Why? Because we're not doing anything with the value. We're not outputting it. We're not saving it. We're not putting it in a container. So let's say we want to, output it, right? We could just do type and wrap. Now it's Python is telling us that, okay, this thing is a string, right? SDR just stands for string, right? That's it. So typecasting, a reminder again, it just converts one data type to another. If you want to convert anything to integers, we just type int, round brackets. But if you want to convert anything into string, it's just str and round brackets. Anything inside of those will be converted to whatever you want it to be. So let's talk about getting an input from the user, right? Because there are often cases you want to get input from the user. Let's say, do you want to get their name, their age, or want to get a number from them, right? We could do that. So to do that, we just type input, the keyword input, then round brackets, then strings. This is important because you want to tell the user what you want from them, right? You want to ask for their name. You have to ask, what is your name? This is what we're doing inside the round brackets and the string. Anything you put inside the string and the round brackets, essentially you'll be asking the user what you want from them, right? Let's say I want to ask for their name. We could just do, what is your name? We can just do that. When we do this, it's asking the user, what is your name? Let's say we have ref. That value ref here will now be in this input, right? But the thing is, this input, we're not doing anything with that input. We're not storing it in a variable. We're not outputting that. We're not using print to output that value. So let's do something with it, right? Let's put that inside a variable so we can use it in the future. We could I'll say recycle. Yeah, I guess we could say recycle in some way. So let's do name, because whenever you are making variables, right, you have to name it in a pretty descriptive way so you know what it is, but also pretty short way, short and concise. That's it. Just whenever you're making a variable, make it short, descriptive, and concise. That's it. So let's say name is equal to input. That's how we create the input from the get the input from the user. We type the keyword input and round brackets the string, and well, this is where we ask the user again. So what we want from the user, let's say, what is your name? And when we do this, when we run this, when we put raf, now raf is now inside a name, and we could now output that, right? So let's output that by using print. Let's output that, and we put it here. Then let's run this raf. When I put raf here, it would now be raf will now be equal to name. So it means that raf is now equal, like the variable name is now equal to the value raf, because raf is now input here. When we do that, we could just output that name, which is raf. Okay, I didn't press it. See, we have raf here. So that's pretty much what user input is. But the important thing about user input is that whenever you grab an input from the user, whenever you use input, it would always be on string. The data type, the data type of the input of the user is always will always be a string. So let's say you want to ask for the age, right? Let's say you want to ask the age of the user. Let's say age, the variable age is equal to input, round brackets, then and let's say enter your age, right? When we grab this and you say, okay, I want to grab the age of the user and add 5 into it for no reason. I don't know why you want to do it, but let's just demonstrate something, right? You might think that when we put, let's say, 20 as the age, you might say, okay, 20 plus 5, that should work, right? Well, it wouldn't, because input, as I said, is the input of the user is always a string. So when you grab the user input and add 5 into it, which is an integer, it wouldn't work. I mean, this is where typecasting comes in, essentially. And we could convert, we have a few ways of doing this, right? We could convert the age into an integer permanently here. Then that's it. So we grab the int, anything inside the int will be converted to integer. So we have age. So now age is now an integer. So we can just do age plus 5, right? That should work. So when we have 20, 20 is now going to be here. Then we converted that 20 into integer. When we add 20 plus 5, that is just 25. That's it, right? But we can also convert, convert the age directly. We could convert the input of the user directly in here. So what we could do is just type int in here, then wrap the whole input in a round bracket. This just tells that whatever is inside the int, which is the input of the user, it will be converted to integers, right? That's it. We can just do that. We can just say age plus 5. We just do enter your age. You enter 20. 20 is now going to be in here. But we converted that to int here, so it's going to be integer. So when we do that, it's going to be 25. Pretty simple. After that, that's pretty much you getting info from a user. It's pretty simple. Just type input, then whatever you want to ask the user. If you want to convert the string into integers or something like that, then you can just type int. But that's pretty much what user input is. You could do a lot of things with user input. We could grab a lot of data from the user, age, number, I don't know, whatever you want, but you could do a lot of things in it. So let's talk about concatenation a bit. Concatenation, you might think, oh my God, what is that fancy word right there? Well, it's simple. It's just adding strings together. Because strings are pretty much the same data type as strings, that means you could add them together. Let's say we have, let's say we get a input from the user. Let's say we have first name. Let's grab, let's type input, then let's type enter your first name. This will just ask for the first name of the user, then it would, when they enter it, it would just be assigned to the value of, the variable first name will be assigned to that first name. So let's type last name right here, then let's just type input. Let's ask the user for their last name. What if I want to connect them together, right? When I have the first name of the user and the last name of the user, I want to add them together. Let's say, how do I do it? Let's say the user inputted Raf here and for the first name, and let's say the last name they put Cruz, I guess. That's another thing. So interesting. What if I want to like connect them together, right? I want to have like Raf Cruz like this, right? How do I do that? Well, we can do it by literally adding them together. What I meant by that is like grabbing the first name and using the addition sign and add the last name together. What that would do is that it would literally add the first and last name together. So an example, so let's run this. Let's say Raf, first name, last name, Cruz. See, it would literally add Raf, which is the first name, and the last name, which is Cruz. Something is, that's interesting actually. Oh, here's a better one. It would literally add Raf and Cruz together, like literally right there. So when you're doing this, you gotta like think, okay, this works, right? But like I want the space in the middle. So you could add a space in the middle by adding a space in the middle by just doing this. So first name plus a string with a space in the middle, that would give you space in the middle here, plus the last name. So let's run this again. Let's say Raf Cruz. Here you go, Raf Cruz, right? That's it. That's how you add strings together. This is going to be really important because when you manipulate data, you want to usually add strings together. Let's say like let's create a little bit of a simpler one. Let's just grab their name, like this. Let's just grab their name. Let's say enter your name. Cannot spell, I guess. So whenever you have, this is like probably a situation where it's really important to use concatenation or adding strings together. Let's say I want to create a message for them, right? Let's say I want to create a message for that user, or for whatever user we have. Let's say let's create a string, then let's say good morning, then space just to create a bit of better readability and stuff. Then let's just say plus name. That's it. So this is where a situation where it's good to have concatenation, where we want to like add maybe a message to the user. Let's say good morning plus the name, which is whatever the user is going to put in. Let's say enter your name, Raf, and here we go. Good morning, Raf. That's an example of where using user input is pretty cool. It's another way of adding strings together, but it's not really adding in some way, but you could think of it as adding. So let's say, let's do the same thing. Good morning. Instead of using addition sign, we could use a comma, then name. That's it. A comma, name. It works exactly like the same, but it has a space to it. So when I do Raf, which will be name, good morning, comma name, it's actually sort of the same as substitution, like an addition symbol, but not at the same time. This is only good for the comma is only good if you want to concatenate strings together, but when you want to add a string and like when you want to add like integers together, it's not going to work when you use a comma instead of an addition. So it only works sort of in when you want to add strings and strings together. So just keep that in mind for now. So when you do this, it's just going to give you good morning, Raf. That's it. So let's talk about string slicing. Now we know how to add strings together, but what if I want to slice the string? You will need it for a couple of reasons, I guess. But the main like knowing how to do it is pretty important because you're gonna need it in the future, right? Let's say we have a variable called, I guess name is always a classic. Say name is equals to Raphael. How about that? I think that's pretty cool. Then down here, let's say I want to get A, right? Before we get A, we gotta understand the topic. We gotta understand the concept that each of these characters have an index, have a position, right? Let's say, actually, I think a better example would not be Raphael, but maybe Raf Cruz. Yeah, I think that's a better example. So we gotta understand that every single character inside the string will have a position or an index. Index and a position are the same thing. It's like a fancy way of saying a position. So Raf has a position. I mean, the R has a position. The F has a position. Even the space has a position. So, and to know those positions, you might think, okay, position of R is probably 1 or A is probably 2. No, that is not the position of it. The position starts at 0. So R has a position of 0. A has the position of 1. So R is 0. A is 1. F is 2. The space has a position of 3. So that is pretty important to understand because this positioning, when you start counting as an in position, the position doesn't just work in strings. You're going to be learning position in probably in list and different, probably list. You're going to be using the same concepts, and knowing the fact that positioning starts at 0 is pretty important, right? So let's say I want to grab A for some reason. We can do that. So first things first, you gotta understand what position the character you want to slice it. A has a position of 1. So after you get the position, you just call the variable, or I guess string, but variable works fine. So you call the variable. Then we grab the brackets, but not the round brackets. We grab the I guess the box brackets and stuff. I don't know how to say it, but this brackets. Then inside the brackets, we just type the position of the character we want to get, which is 1. So when we run this, it wouldn't give us nothing because we didn't output it. We're not doing anything with the value. But let's say we want to output it, so we can see. So Raf, then the type name, the brackets, then the position of the character you want to cut, which is 1. Let's type 1 here. Then when we run that, we'll get an A. That's it. Let's say we want to get the first letter. First letter will always be, or the first character will always be 0. Has a position of 0. So that should give us R. Let's say we want to grab this space right here, right? So just for example, that would be position, what is it? 0, 1, 2. That's a position 3. So when we type 3 in here, it should give us nothing because it's just a space. Now you're thinking, okay, that's pretty cool. Grabbing a character is pretty nice. That's always pretty interesting. But what if I want to grab a portion of the string, not just one character? I want to grab multiple characters, right? That should be cool. Well, we can do that, but we have to understand that before we understand that, before we have to like think the position. Of course, that's pretty important, but we have to understand like sort of a range, right? So to the left side here, we're gonna put like where we want to start grabbing, and to the right side here, we want to think, okay, where we want to stop grabbing characters, right? So let's say I want to start at 0. That will be wrap. Then let's say I want to stop at 0, 1, 2. I want to stop here, right? So you might think, okay, we're gonna grab everything from 0 position, which is this, dr, until 2. So 0, 1, and 2. You might think, okay, that's gonna grab raf, right? Well, it wouldn't, sort of. It will only grab RA because 0 is inclusive and 2 is not. Meaning that to the left side, it will include everything for the beginning part. It will, that's fine. You don't need to think about that. But the last part to the right here, it would not include that character. So instead of grabbing F here, it would just leave it because it's not included in here. So whenever you're doing string slicing, you gotta understand that to the right side, it's not inclusive, meaning that you have to maybe add 1 to include the character you want to include. Let's say 0, 1, 2. Let's say because it's 2, you have to add, I think, 3. Yeah, you have to add 1 into it. That's pretty much string slicing. That's it's a concept is a bit interesting. You might need some time to understand the concept, but when you understand the concept of it, even it's gonna be pretty cool, and it's really pretty powerful at the same time because you could just manipulate data and stuff. But you could also put the the string that you sliced into a variable. You could store it in a variable. Let's say we have a variable called partial name. Then actually, let's just name it first name because I feel like that's better. Let's say I want to grab the first name of the name, which is just to do it, we just grab name, then the brackets again. Then I want to start from the beginning, which is going to be 0. And we want to grab the first name only. So that's going to be 0, 1, 2. Oops. So let's do 3 because 3 is not inclusive, meaning we're not gonna really include the space here, but we're including everything here. So when we do that, we're not doing anything, but of course, let's output that here. First name, yeah, we got first name equals ref, easy peasy. But we could also do this. When you were, this just means that starts from the beginning. That's just it. Like when you don't put anything to the left side here, that just tells Python, okay, I want to grab from the beginning, first character until 3, but 3 is not inclusive, so technically it's just the position 2 until position 2, from 0 until position 2. When you do that, it's just a ref. But you could also do this. That just tells Python, okay, I want to grab everything from the beginning because we didn't put anything to the left. But if the right is empty, if the right side is empty, that just tells Python, okay, I want to grab everything until to the left. When we do that, it just grabs the whole thing. But what if I say, okay, from 3, from here, and this one's blank, that just tells Python, okay, I want to grab from everything from 3 until the very end, right? So 3 is inclusive. Always remember that because it's to the left side. So that means that from this space right here until to the very end, that's what we're grabbing. So when we run this, it's going to include the space and cruise. That's it. So yeah, that's pretty much string slicing. And there's like, there's like another thing you could do with string slicing. There's like a -1 here. That just like tells Python, okay, when you have a -1, that just tells Python, okay, I want to grab the end one, right? So -1. So when we have 0, that's like the first character. But when we have -1, that is the last character. When we have -2, that's the second to the last character. When we have -3, that's the third to the last character, I guess. So when we do -3, that's going to give us 3. But when we have -1, that should give us Z because it's like the last character to it. So yeah, that's pretty much what string slicing is. It's pretty cool. It's pretty interesting. So let's talk a bit of methods right now. A method is probably the most really useful because it manipulates the data quite a bit. So methods are just a piece of data. I mean, not a piece of data, but a piece of action that Python can do on a piece of data. right? Let's say we have a name. Let's say we have a name here. Let's say Raphael. Let's say here. Let's say I want to make Raphael uppercase, right? What if I want that? What if I want Raphael in uppercase? You might think, okay, if you probably know a bit of, let's say, looping and stuff like that, you might think, okay, I'll just do a loop and I will just make every one of these like uppercase. But that's gonna be really redundant, and you don't need to do that, right? What you could just do is just type name dot, then the name of the method, which is gonna be upper, then parentheses. I mean not round brackets. When you do that, that's just gonna make everything uppercase in a string. But to think about this for a second, this is not permanent. Just like this is like the function that we did earlier. This is not permanent, meaning that when you output name again here, it would still be all lowercase. See, it is not permanent. So if you want to make it permanent, we just do the same thing as we did earlier. It will be name dot upper. That's it. That's gonna make it permanent. Here we go. And a method, let's dissect method a little bit more, right? A method, to use a method, we just type dot to whatever object or whatever variable or data we want to use it for. We type dot directly after that. Then after that, we type the name of the method and the round brackets. The round brackets is always mandatory no matter what method you're using, because sometimes it expects like an additional things they want inside the round brackets. There's like probably hundreds of methods that exist out there. I'm not gonna go every single one. I'm just gonna give you an example, because once you know that, okay, I just need to put dot, the name of the method, then the round brackets. Once you understand that you just literally just need to do that, you could just search up whatever method you want to use, and that's it. You could just like probably figure it out in like 2 seconds. So what this method does, it just makes the strings all uppercase. But what if I want to say make it all lowercase now, right? Let's mess this up a bit. Let's mess this up. What if I want to make this all lowercase? We could just do, instead of upper, we could just type lower. When we print name now, it should be all in lowercase. That's it. You could also there's a lot of functions that you could, or methods you could do in math, but I'm not going to go into that because it's pretty simple and you could just search it up like really quick. In like a snap, you could just do it. So yeah, that's what methods are. It's just a piece of action that Python can do in a piece of data. It's pretty powerful because you could manipulate the data pretty quick. You could even what is it? Yeah, you could pretty much do a lot of things with it. So the thing, okay, a bit of recap, I guess. I want you guys to know this, but like to use a method, you just grab whatever object, whatever variable, whatever string you want to use it to, then type dot directly after that, then type the name of the method and round brackets. That's it. And it is not permanent unless you do this. Unless you do this, but if you don't do that, that means it's not permanent. It's not, yeah. So let's talk about the last topic that we're going to look at today, which is going to be if statements. So if statements are probably really might be, I'll say hard to understand, but it's going to be really useful to you if you know how to use it properly. So what an if statement is that it just executes a block of code if the condition that you set is correct. So let's look at here, right? Let's say we use the keyword if, right? Let's use the keyword if. Actually, to create the if statement, we use the keyword if. Then right after the if statement, you type the condition you have. This is where operators in math is going to be useful, right? You know, those greater than symbol, less than symbol, equals, greater than or equal symbol will be pretty useful. Let's say we want to create a program. Let's say we're in a theater, right? Let's say we want to create a program that checks if the age is bigger than or bigger than 12. Let's say if they're bigger than 12, then we're not going to give them a discount. But if they're lower than 12, then let's give them a discount. Let's create that program right now. Let's say age is, well, let's just set a random age for now. Let's say 15, right? Then to create the if statement, we just type the if, then let's type the condition now. I want to create a condition. Let's say age, if the age is less than 12, if age is less than 12, then let's just print you got a discount. All right, so if statement to create if, then we type the condition, then the colon here. The colon is important, so whenever you finish the condition, you always type the colon here. This tells Python, like, okay, which code down here is going to be executed when the condition is true, right? So when you type the colon, anything after that that is indented will be run if this condition is true, right? So right now the condition is not true, so when I run this, it wouldn't do nothing, right? Because this is false, meaning that whatever is under here would not be run. But what if it is, say 10, right? If it is, it would then execute whatever the code down here is, right? So this condition is now equal to true, meaning that whatever the print statement here, that would be executed. Let's say we want to add stuff. Let's say print you are under 12. When you do that, it would just execute it here as well. That's it. But what if now you're thinking, okay, that's pretty cool. That's pretty interesting. But what if I want to have sort of an extra if statement if the previous if statements isn't true? You might think of that. Probably, I'm not sure if you're thinking of it right now, but we can do that. If this condition is not true, we could execute a portion of a code that we want to execute. So to create that code that we want to be executed when this condition is not true, or if this if condition is not true, we can create that by typing else, then colon, then after that we indent whatever the code we want to run. So let's say print you are over 12 years old. So what this tells us is that when this condition is false, it would go directly to else because there's nothing else in there. So if this condition is false, this would be executed. So when we run this, of course, this is not gonna execute because the condition here is true. But when we make it false, the else statement will be executed. But what if you're thinking now, okay, I want to create, but what if I want to have another if statement, but like I want to have a specific condition in it, I guess, sort of an if statement instead of an if, sort of, or something like that. But let me just create that for now. Then I'll try to explain it better later on. Say we can do that by having sort of an elif statement, then elif, then the condition. Let's have the condition. Let's say age is bigger than 60. And when we do that, let's just say you got a discount as well. Let's just do print. You are over 60. So whenever you do this elif statement right here, right? What it would do is that this will only be executed if this condition is true and if this condition is false. So what Python would do when when we run this, first it would check if this condition is true. If it is, then it would run this, and it would ignore this. It would ignore everything else after that, because it would not run it because this is true. But if this is false, it would go down here to this elif statement, and it would check if this condition is true. I mean, you could add like so many elif statements. You could probably have 100 or 200 elif statements if you want. Probably unpractical, but you could do it. Let's have else here. Let's say if the age is it's not less than 12, but also not less than 60, I guess you have, let's just say you got no discount. No discount. So what this would be doing now is that Python would now check, okay, is this age less than 12? If it is, it would execute this code and ignore everything else here. But if it's false, if this condition is false, but what it would do now is that it would not run this. Then Python would go to the second elif statement here, and it would check if this condition is true. If it is true, then it would run this and ignore this. But if both of these conditions are essentially false, it would always run this. It would automatically run this else statement. So when you have essentially what the else statement would do is like when nothing else is when no condition is true, it would just run the else statement, which is you got no discount. For now, 155 is bigger than 60, meaning that you would run this. But what if 50 is not less than 12, but it's not over 50, so it just says you got no discount. That's like the basic idea of an if statement. You could have multiple elif statements there, I just said earlier, but that's like the main idea behind it. I think we don't have enough time as much as I'd like to go to looping right now. But yeah, I think that's pretty much the basics of Python right there. You could do a lot of stuff with it. You could, as technically what we did here is like sort of a program in a theater. Let's try to make it a bit polished, make it a little bit fancy, I guess. Let's try to incorporate a lot of things that we know from now. Let's create a program in which we're gonna ask the user their age, and if their age is less than or equal to 12, then we're gonna give them a discount. But if it's bigger than 60 or equal to 60, we're gonna give them a discount for being a senior. But if in between, then we're not gonna give them anything. They got no discount. That's it. So to create this, we just first we have to ask the age for the user from the user. We'll say input, enter your age. Here, after we get the age from the user, let's create now the if statement. To create the if statement again, we just have the keyword if, then the condition. If age is less than or equal to 12, then the colon. The colon is pretty important. After that, we have to indent the code that we want to run if this condition is true. Let's say if I want to say to the user, you got a discount. Let's say another one. You are under or under the age of 12. Okay, we created that first condition. Now let's sort of create the second condition. So I want to say second condition, but the condition if the first condition is not true, I guess I guess you could think of it as that. So when we do that, let's create the second condition now. So if age is bigger than or equal to 60, then let's type you got discount. And you are or over the age of 60. Then let's create an else statement that that outputs, let's say you got no discount if both of these conditions are false. Say you got no discount. So let's review what it's going to be doing, right? We're going to grab an age from the user. Then once we grab the age, it will check, okay, is that age less than 12? If it is, we're going to do this. We're just going to execute this code. But if it's not, it would go down here. It will check this condition. If this condition is true, then it will execute this code. But if both of them is false, if both of the conditions are false from this, it will just print this. So, but one thing to keep in mind right now is, as I said earlier, is that whenever we grab an input from the user, it's always going to be in strings. And we cannot compare strings and numbers together. I mean, we sort of could, but it wouldn't give us our desired results, I guess. So when we run this, for example, let's say 50, it would not give us, it would give us an error because you can't compare strings and numbers together, right? So to fix this, we just convert the input from the user into an integer. We do that. Oh, okay, I can't do clear on this. Okay. When we do this, we type 50. It says you got no discount because 50 is not less than or equal to 12, and it is not bigger or equal to 60. So it automatically goes to else. Let's say we are 10. You got a discount because it goes here, meaning that this portion of code will be run. Let's say we are 99 years old. When we run this, it would not, this condition is false, so it automatically goes here. Then this condition is true, so it would execute this portion of my code. And that's pretty much it. And I want to go to looping, but I don't have enough time. So yeah, that's pretty much the basics of Python. You can do a lot of stuff with what you just learned right now, but you could always go further beyond this. There's a lot of topics above this, like different data structures, functions, object-oriented programming. But this is the basic programming, essentially. This is probably the basics and fundamentals of Python. Once you understand this, anything above this is pretty much simple and easy. So yeah, that is pretty much the workshop. If anyone has a question, if Heshwar has a question, let's hear it. I guess you know what? I'll ask you to unmute yourself. Let's say if you have any question right now. Can you unmute yourself, Heshwar? I'm gonna stop sharing my screen right now. Okay. Ishwar is okay. Okay, he's unmuted himself, but he's not talking. So yeah, that's pretty much the workshop, guys. So yeah, I'm gonna end the meeting now. So you guys have a great day.